Ethics Committee of the Chartered Institute of Directors, Nigeria, and I'll be anchoring this program for you this morning. I'd like to say a very, very, very warm welcome to everyone, and I hope that we're all geared and ready to pick up the lessons from this conversation. I can assure you it's going to be engaging, it's going to be informative, and you will definitely have lessons that you would have learned, by the end of it. Again, this is our Ethics Committee webinar titled Navigating the Ethical Horizon, Lessons in Cultivating a Culture of Ethical Excellence for Effective Corporate Governance. You will agree with me that this is a very topical title and theme, and I'm sure that this conversation will go a long way in helping us all embellish and embed the habits for ethical excellence in our organizations. Thank you very much to our panelists, to our moderator. Thank you again to the chairperson of the Ethics Committee and to everyone at the Chartered Institute of Directors for putting this together in our journey for excellence in our corporate governance in Nigeria. Well, this morning we want to make sure that we're managing our time really well. And so without much ado, I'm going to move on to welcoming onto this webinar our chief host, who is the president of Council and chairman of Council, the Chartered Institute of Directors, Nigeria, Alhaji Tijani M. Borodo, LLM and FIOD. And of course, I'm going to acknowledge as well I don't know if we could just highlight him if he's here. Okay. I'm also going to welcome and then acknowledge our second vice president and the chairman of the Ethics Committee, Chartered Institute of Directors, Nigeria, Mrs. Amina Oyagola, fellow of the Chartered Institute of Directors as well. I believe the Director General and CEO of the IOD is here as well, Mr. Dele Alimi. DG, you're very welcome. And of course, our panelists and the moderator, Mrs. Lola Adekonye, who is Country Director, Center for International Private Enterprise. As we go along, I will do a few more introductions and acknowledgements. But for now, it's my pleasure and my honor to invite the host for this, the chief host for this morning, the President and Chairman of Council, Chartered Institute of Directors, Nigeria, Alhaji Tijani M. Borodo, to give us a few welcoming remarks. Mr. President.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Amina and everybody. Good morning, everybody. It's really an honor and a privilege for me to be with you here today. As Uju has said, we want to manage time, so we'll be in the process of managing time. So I have a few remarks to make, and I make them thus. These are my welcoming remarks to the members of the Governing Council, past presidents, and distinguished elders of the Institute here present. Members of the Executive Committee of the Institute of Directors, Nigeria, our distinguished panelists, Angela Carrington, former chair, Global Network of Directors Institute, Professor Kemi Ogunyemi, Professor of Business Ethics, Lagos Business School, Pan Atlantic University, Ms. Chinu Awe, Independent Consultant, Mr. Olakunle Olusanya, Executive Director, Legal and Public Affairs and General Counsel, FanMilk, Mr. Lola Adekanya, Program Director, Center for International Private Enterprise, Moderator, the Chairman and members of the Ethics Committee, fellows and members of the Institute, our valued guests, associate partners, and sponsors, gentlemen of the press, ladies and gentlemen, once more, good morning. The Chartered Institute of Directors Nigeria is firmly committed to fostering ethical leadership and corporate governance excellence in our nation. This is why we are delighted to welcome you all to this significant webinar organized by our Ethics Committee. The theme for today's discussion is Navigating the Ethical Horizon, Lessons in Cultivating a Culture of Ethical Excellence for Effective Corporate Governance. This is crucial in today's business landscape. You will agree with me. So the topic is apt for today. Building a culture of ethical excellence and trust in corporate governance is more important than ever. It ensures the long-term success and sustainability of an organization and enhances its reputation and stakeholder relationship. Stakeholders, from investors and employees to communities and consumers, contractors and suppliers, increasingly demand transparency, accountability, and responsible business ethics. Organizations that proactively embrace ethical values and foster a culture of ethical excellence will be well positioned to thrive for the present and the future. There are several key approaches to creating such a culture. First, core values must be the driving force. Every organization needs clear, well-defined values that align with the mission and vision. These values should be integrated into everything the organization does, from decision-making to employee interaction. Secondly, leaders play a crucial role. Leaders must set the tone from the top by demonstrating ethical behavior and making ethical decisions. They should encourage open communication where employees feel comfortable reporting any unethical practices or concerns without fear of retaliation. When leaders prioritize ethics and integrity, it sends a powerful message throughout the organization, encouraging others to follow suit. Thirdly, rewarding ethical behavior is essential. Organizational systems must reward and recognize ethical behavior to create a culture of integrity. Employees who act in alignment with values and models ethical behavior should be praised and recognized for their actions, while unethical behaviors should be addressed promptly and appropriately. Overlooking unethical behavior increases the likelihood that such behavior will occur. Fourthly, training and education are also crucial. Equipping employees with the knowledge and tools to make ethical decisions is key. Regular ethical trainings, along with case studies and real-life examples, can significantly improve employee understanding of ethical dilemma and their impact on the organization. Promoting accountability through performance, evaluations, and other incentives further reinforces the importance of ethical conduct. Additionally, establishing a strong ethical framework with clear policies that reflect the organization's values ensures consistency and transparency in decision-making. Finally, establishing mechanisms for reporting and addressing concerns is vital. Employees need safe and confidential channels to voice concerns about unethical practices. This demonstrates the organization's commitment to ethical behavior and build trust among employees. Of course, building a strong ethical culture is not without its challenges. Management inaction, bureaucratic hurdles, and resistance to change can all be obstacles. However, by regularly assessing the organization's ethical climate and taking necessary actions, we can ensure a strong foundation for ethical behavior. Building an ethical culture takes time and effort, but rewards are significant. Ethical companies inspire trust, attract and retain top talent, and ultimately contribute to a more sustainable and prosperous company and the future. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to inform you that we have lined up an esteemed panel of industry experts, regulators, and thought leaders in ethics and corporate culture who will share impactful presentations from their wealth of experience to shed more light on our topic. They will address real-life experiences and vulnerabilities in leadership, illustrating the importance of ethics in cultivating a culture of ethical excellence for effective corporate governance. At this juncture, I would like to thank our esteemed panelists for honoring our invitation, despite their very busy schedules. I also like to especially acknowledge the Ethics Committee, led by Mrs. Amina Egwala, FCIOD, our second Vice President, for putting this webinar together. The Institute will continue to champion ethical leadership and best practices in corporate governance, ensuring our members have the resources and guidance to navigate today's complex business environment. Thank you for joining us today. I look forward to our discussions and shared sentiments to promote ethical excellence in corporate governance. Corporate governance together. We can create an environment where ethical behavior is a norm and not an exception. Thank you for listening to me. Enjoy your webinar. Lastly, I have to apologize. I might have to leave because I have a board meeting of African Corporate Governance Network. It's about the same time, but I chose to address you this webinar before joining that board meeting. So you have to excuse me, I have to join that board meeting. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for that very, very, very welcoming your remarks to welcome us and for your assurance that the Chartered Institute of Directors really is at the forefront of ensuring we have excellence in our corporate governance and ethics for our organizations in Nigeria. Thank you very much, sir. Before I go on, very quickly, I would like to introduce my co-anchor for today, Mrs. Kemi Adewale. She'll be joining me to ensure that we have a smooth and seamless transition between the very many sessions holding today. Mrs. Kemi Adewale, who is also a member of the Ethics Committee of the Chartered Institute of Directors. Kemi, if you're here, please, if you could be highlighted and just say hello.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, moving on. Our president has already given us a very good background to what this webinar is about, but we have the chairperson of the Ethics Committee on the webinar as well, and this is the idea from the Ethics Committee. So it's my pleasure to invite the second vice chair of the Chartered Institute of Directors of Nigeria and the chairperson of the Ethics Committee, Mrs. Amina Oyagbola, to give us a bit more insight as to the objectives of the webinar, what to expect, and then some welcome remarks. Mrs. Oyagbola, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Iruku. Thank you very much for that very warm welcome. And let me again thank Mr. President for those fantastic welcoming remarks that have really set the tone for this webinar. So I'm just going to proceed with the protocols. The chief host, who you've just heard from, Alhaji Tijani M. Borodo, LLM, FCIOD, our dear President and Chairman of the Governing Council, Chartered Institute of Nigeria. The Vice President, the first Vice President, Mr. Tunji Oyebanji, distinguished members of the Governing Council, past presidents and elders of our great institute, members of the Presidium, and members of the Executive Committee of the Chartered Institute of Nigeria here present with us today. Our distinguished panelists, and I will repeat who they are because we're really privileged and honored to have the caliber of panelists that you'll be listening to later on. Angela Cherrington, former chair, Global Network of Director Institutes, Professor Kemi Ogunyemi, the Professor of Business Ethics from the Lagos Business School, Mrs. Tinuade Awe, an independent consultant, and indeed the former CEO of NGX Regulation, to be coming with a lot of insights from that perspective. Mr. Olakunle Olusonya, the Executive Director, Legal, Public Affairs, and General Secretary of Fan Milk and Danone, Nigeria. And of course, our moderator who will be facilitating the discussions, the very rich discussions on this very important subject, Ms. Lola Adekoye, Program Director, Center for International Private Enterprise. I thank you all very much indeed on behalf of the Institute. The Vice Chair also of the Ethics Committee, who supports me in a manner that I cannot describe, Dr. Nosike Agokai. Other esteemed members of the Chartered Institute of Directors Ethics Committee, some of whom are here present on this platform this morning, and fellows and members of the Chartered Institute of Directors Nigeria, our valued guests and associates and sponsors, our media partners and members of the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of our President and Chairman of the Governing Council and members of the Governing Council and the Ethics Committee, I hereby extend a very warm welcome to all in attendance this morning. We are greatly honored by the presence of our esteemed panelists and express our gratitude for their commitment to ethics and the valuable time they have devoted to sharing their perspectives with us today on this very important subject. The theme, as Mr. President has already outlined for this webinar today, is Navigating the Ethical Horizon, Lessons in Cultivating a Culture of Ethical Excellence for Effective Corporate Governance. This topic holds significant relevance to the contemporary challenges encountered by organizations, indeed by our nation and worldwide. Ethical excellence is at the core of effective corporate governance, and we are thrilled to have a diverse group of distinguished experts and thought leaders here today to share their insights and experience on how organizations can foster a culture of ethics and integrity. Throughout the webinar, we will be exploring strategies for navigating the complex ethical landscape, and we'll be discussing practical ways to promote ethical behavior within organizations. Progressive organizations understand that cultivating an ethical culture requires stakeholder involvement. And so as we delve into today's session, we will focus on several key areas, such as clarity of fundamental principles. So we'll be asking certain questions. To what extent are our fundamental principles clearly delineated? Do they align with the organization's mission, vision, and values, as Mr. President highlighted? And are they effectively communicated by board and management and integrated into the decision-making process? Secondly, leadership by example. Are leaders, directors, executives, members of management committees exemplifying these principles? How can we cultivate an atmosphere of trust where employees feel comfortable to voice their concerns and where ethical conduct is recognized and rewarded? Thirdly, stakeholder relationships. How can our commitment to ethics strengthen stakeholder relationships and create a diverse, equitable, and inclusive workplace built on trust and respect for all? Fourthly, measuring ethical culture. What metrics will we employ or do we employ to gauge the efficacy of our ethical culture? Have we implemented an ethics management governance framework for consistent evaluation and enhancement of ethics initiatives, training protocols, and communication strategies? Fifth, reporting mechanisms. Do employees have readily accessible avenues for reporting their concerns? And do they feel sufficiently at ease and safe to utilize those channels? Are we receptive as organizations to feedback and prepared to adjust our strategies to enhance our pursuit of ethical excellence? These are some of the questions that we will be interrogating on this platform today. Our distinguished panel will explore strategies for cultivating a culture of ethical excellence that goes beyond mere compliance. We are confident that they will address the topic effectively and provide valuable insights on incorporating ethical decision-making into the core structure of your organization to enhance performance and enable your sustainability. This will involve navigating through ethical dilemmas, maintaining ethics during times of innovation, managing competing priorities, demonstrating leadership, fostering a culture of learning and understanding the responsibilities of all of us as directors on boards and management. We hope you will find today's discussion beneficial and indeed insightful, and trust that it will inspire you to cultivate a culture of ethical excellence within your organizations and drive positive change in your organization, in your community, and indeed in the marketplace. Finally, I'd like to once again, on behalf of Mr. President and Chairman of the Governing Council of the Chartered Institute of Directors, and on behalf of my esteemed members of the Ethics Committee and members of this great institute, I warmly welcome all participants, all panelists, and all distinguished guests. Thank you very much for joining us and choosing to join us this morning as we look forward to a thought-provoking and engaging discussion. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the session.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Oyagbola, for those remarks. And thank you again for the very deep insight into the objectives of this webinar and the part that we'll be going through as our panelists discuss this very topical issue. Well, moving on, ladies and gentlemen, our distinguished guests and our panelists, it's my pleasure to say we're about to begin our panel discussion. And to take us through this, it's my pleasure to welcome and to introduce our moderator for today. Mrs. Lola Adekonye is the Country Director for Nigeria at the Center for International Private Enterprise, CIPE, overseeing a diverse portfolio of thematic programs in the country. She also has responsibility for the Accountability, Governance and Integrity, AGI, thematic portfolio across Sub-Saharan Africa as the Africa Program Director. Lola is a licensed attorney at the New York State and the Nigerian Bar. She holds 2 Masters of Law degrees in Securities and International Financial Regulations from Georgetown University and in International Economics from the University of Warwick, London, England. She also holds a postgraduate advanced certificate in Circular Economy from the Cambridge University's George Business School, amongst others. Her passion for advancing innovative solutions and leveraging technology to strengthen public and private sector accountability in emerging markets compelled her decision to live and work in emerging economies, supporting grassroots foundations and charities in her spare time. She's skilled in institutional reform through collective action and multi-stakeholder cooperation. She has advised institutional shareholders in public and private sectors in over 10 countries, and her expertise ranges from international financial regulation, illicit financial flows, beneficial ownership transparency, business integrity and accountability in value chains, regulatory efficiency, and the rule of law. I think today we really do have a great panel and a great moderator who will help us in this very insightful and thought-provoking conversation, to use your words, Madam Chairman. And so it's my pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to invite Ms. Lola Adekonye. And from there, she will invite in the panelists for the panel conversation. Thank you very much, Lola. You're very welcome.
Thank you so much, Ms. Iruku, for the kind remarks. Good morning again. I'm very honored and delighted to be moderating this panel with truly experienced experts. So again, thank you to the Institute of Directors and to the Ethics Committee for putting this together. As I know this is part of the mandate and responsibility for the IOD. So I'm honored and delighted. Thank you. Standing on existing protocols, let me introduce our panelists first, and then we will engage and interact with everybody else in the webinar. So if you're just watching, make sure you have the screen up where you can vote, because we have a few questions in the Zoom poll that we would like you to respond to, and that would start the thought-provoking plan that the Institute of Directors has for us. So we have 4 panelists. You've already heard their names, but let me tell you a bit more about them. And I don't think this was intentional It so happens that two of the panelists are lawyers. I happen to be a lawyer. So it's not intentional that I start off with introducing Professor Kemi Ogunyemi, who is a lawyer, one of the lawyers on the panel. Professor Kemi Ogunyemi holds a degree in law from the University of Ibadan. She's a professor of business ethics at the Lagos Business School. She also holds a Masters of Law from the University of Strathclyde. She holds a Master's in Business Administration and a PhD degree from the Pan-Atlantic University. Kemi currently leads sessions in business ethics, managerial anthropology, self-leadership, and sustainability management at the Lagos Business School. For many years, and I met Kemi while she was director of the Christopher Collade Center for Research in Leadership and Ethics. She's also a director for the school's senior management program, and she now also serves on the board of the business school. Kemi consults and researches on lots of really interesting topics. SIPE has been a beneficiary. That's the Center for International Private Enterprise, of Kemi's wealth of knowledge and experience in conducting really interesting research and authoring numerous publications and resources for faculty and tertiary institutions, but also for non-profit organizations like SIPE in shaping strategy across the African region. So Kemi, it's a pleasure to have you. Great, you have your camera on.
Thank you.
I have just one screen, so I'm just moving around. I can't see when you come on, but I'll invite you to come on if you haven't turned on your camera. So let me introduce our second panelist, Tinuade Awe. Tinu is an attorney as well. She's an attorney at law, and she's now a consultant in the governance and ESG space. Tinu completed the Competent Board Sustainability and ESG Designation Certificate in March 2024. This is the groundbreaking area of reporting that captains of industries are trying to figure out to get businesses to be more involved in developmental growth, all-round developmental growth of nations and economies. Tinu also has an LLB degree from the Obafemi Awolowo University of Ile-Ife. She has a Masters of Law degree as well from Harvard Law School and from the London School of Economics and Political Science, LSE. Tinu is admitted to the Nigerian and New York Bar, and she's an associate member of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators in Nigeria, a member of the Chartered Institute of Stockbrokers in Nigeria, also a member of the Capital Market Registrars. She's a fellow of the Compliance Institute of Nigeria and a life member of the Chartered Institute of Directors, Nigeria. Tinu sits on several boards. She's a non-executive director on several boards, but she's also a supervisory board member of GRI, which is the Global Reporting Initiative, and that's the world's largest producer of sustainability reporting standards. So groundbreaking stuff. Welcome, Tinu. Let's see. Yes, there you go. Tinu is right here. Excellent. Okay, so two more panelists to go, and thankfully not a lawyer this time. So Angela Sherrington. Angela is a chartered director in South Africa, and she was recently the former CEO of the Institute of Directors in South Africa. She joined IOD South Africa in 2004, and interestingly, she joined to grow the focus area of the IOD on education, which is part of what the IOD for Nigeria is doing today. She was previously the Chief Operating Officer at the IOD, and then she moved on to become a director and now has served for many years on the board of the IOD. She's involved in field director education. She's been in that practice for 20 years and has been in executive leadership roles within professional bodies, including nonprofits. She was recognized as the Executive Director of the Year in 2018 at an award that was given at the Executive World Congress in Belgium. Angela has been at the forefront of South African corporate governance journey. She participated in the release of a few resources we are super familiar with by now, the King Code 3 and 4. Angela serves as chair. She was former chair of the Global Network of Directors Institute, GNDI, and she now works actively within the Secretariat. She also served on the ACGN, which is the Africa Corporate Governance Network. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. And finally, Mr. Olakunle Olusoya. Mr. Olusoya is a distinguished legal and business expert. I think that means, Mr. Olusoya, you're a lawyer as well. I didn't pay attention to that, right? So 4 lawyers, but we will make sure not to bore you because I believe everybody thinks lawyers are boring. Most people believe lawyers are boring. So Mr. Olakunle is a lawyer, but he serves as the Legal and Public Affairs Director and General Secretary of Fan Milk and Danone Nigeria. He oversees legal affairs and manages reputational risks and develops public affairs strategy across West Africa. He is a director at the European Business Chamber, I think that's the Chamber of Commerce, Nigeria, promoting trade and investment between European and Nigerian companies, and a trade advisor to some European trade missions in Nigeria. Olakunle has received notable accolades, including being named among the 40 under 40 top lawyers in Nigeria, Esquire Nigerian Legal Award, listed on Legal 500 GC. I can go on and on. His background includes programs taken at the Oxford Business University and Lagos Business School. You're welcome, Mr. Olusoya.
Thank you very much.
Great. So I think sometimes it feels a bit mundane to read these profiles, but it's very helpful to give you a sense of the background and expertise of the resources we have. And so the questions will be framed in the context of their diverse backgrounds. Academia, a former regulator, Tinu was the regulator for many years, or worked at NGX for many years and was the CEO of NGX Reg. So, Angela and Mr. Olakunle bring diverse backgrounds. So I'm excited to jump into questions, and I would like to start with the basic question. But before we do that, let's run through 3 polls in 1 minute, 20 seconds. 3 polls, 1 minute, 20 seconds. The first poll would be up for 40 minutes. So if I can get some help from the magic team behind the scenes, there you go. 40 seconds, and your time starts now. So we have the 3 polls running at the same time. So that means 1 minute, 20 seconds. And then we'll see what the responses are, because I think every organization is different. But to be honest, the challenges with building an ethical culture, a lot of times they are similar and they may vary from context to context. And so this is what we'll learn from our panelists today. So I see hosts and panelists cannot vote. So I'm going to close this screen. But I'm eager to hear what the biggest ethical challenges most companies seem to be facing, or if it spreads across these ones that were selected. And just to note also, there's a Q&A tab. So if you already have questions before the panelists start speaking, you're welcome to put them in there. So I think we'll give it just 20 seconds, 20 more seconds. What are the most effective ways to promote ethical behavior in the workplace? You might want to even select 2 answers, but I'm not sure that you can. Okay, so let's close that poll now. If we can see the answers, I would love to, and share the answers on the screen. And I'd like to start with Professor Kemi Ogunyemi on the first question. Great, thank you. All right, so if you can all see the answers. Yeah, the biggest ethical challenges, they vary, but compliance with regulations, excellent. We have a very experienced regulator, person with regulations experience. Leadership, setting the tone. leadership setting the tone. And, really, we're talking about directors who play a role as leaders, aspiring directors, even the vibe in the middle, aspiring to be leaders. Brilliant, excellent. Okay, so let's start there. And this question will go to all the panelists. So please feel free to talk about this question from your specific perspective. Kemi, let's start with this. From your experience in research, working with directors or conducting retreats where you go through thought-provoking ethical dilemmas, how have you found to be the most effective ways for organizations and leaders in companies to foster a culture where ethical decision making becomes ingrained within the corporate governance structure, rather than merely being a set of guidelines to adhere to, but it becomes almost automated or second nature within the organization for employees across, multiple departments to feel a strong commitment to operating with ethics, even when they face dilemmas?
Thank you for the question, Lola, and good morning, everybody. It's something that has been touched on already in the introduction to the seminar, but obviously it's so important that we're all going to keep discussing it throughout. So the leadership tone is something that also came through in the polls, is a very important one. But as a friend reminded me recently that it's not just the leadership, it's also the followership. But when we look at the leadership of the organization, we can easily see that it becomes very difficult for things to go well if the leader does not show the good example or does not emphasize what is the expectation with regard to the culture. In my experience teaching, research, in consulting, what I have found is that many times people experience greater pressure to do the wrong thing, or to omit doing the right thing, or to overlook their colleagues doing the wrong thing, when they are not really sure where their bosses and their leaders stand with regard to ethics. They may see the core values beautifully stated. They may have attended trainings on ethics within the organization. But if they don't see that the leader actually practices those ideas, or sometimes takes on the cost of being ethical, then after a while, they may start thinking that this is just talk, that this is not really what the organization supports. And of course, that doesn't show a culture that aligns with ethical standards. Also, when they don't have a clear way of reporting on ethical behavior, or when they don't see any support when it is reported, then again, the confidence that really this is the culture that the company wants to foster may drop. And the other aspect that can really affect the ethical culture being established by the leader is when the reward system or the appraisal systems have nothing to do with ethics. So if people see that it's only for the cosmetic value that we talk about ethics within the organization, if they don't see that it actually affects their progress within the organization or the recognition that it gets, or that anybody asks them how they achieved the targets that are set for them, then trust in all the ethical narrative that is coming through the organization drops. So I think these are the areas where leaders need to actually make a lot of effort to lead the way by precisely ensuring that their own decisions are manifestly considering their ethical nuances, and also by following through when things are happening in the organization, when people behave well and when people don't behave well. In this way, they will be communicating clearly that ethics is important to the organization, and then it will be easier to make it part of the organizational culture, so that people, I don't know whether it will ever become automated, but people will more easily default to try to do the right thing and they will feel greater encouragement to do that, and also to report wrongdoing, no matter who they see involved.
Thank you, Kemi. I think if I were to summarize that, I'd say watch what, you know how you say, watch what I say, not what I do. That's and then also the idea of there's a quote that a nation is known by the people they choose to recognize. I like that. I like the way you summarized it. Let me come to Angela. And Angela, if you could talk about this, maybe from a story and experience maybe in South Africa or anywhere else in the world, where you've seen a strong ethical culture because of the leadership tone and posture. And what was it about the leadership tone and posture?
Thank you so much. I'd like to talk about it from two perspectives. So I think if you work in a global environment, you get to see the good, the bad, and the ugly. So in terms of that positive culture, that promotion of ethical excellence, I agree with all the comments that are made, and there are going to be many elements that cut across a lot of our questions and discussions that we have today. But that leadership setting the tone is absolutely critical. I've certainly seen instances where the leadership set the tone in the boardroom only. And then when they step out of the boardroom doors, their words and actions do not align. And I think that is an example of where it can possibly go wrong, because that commitment to ethics is not being pulled through into day-to-day actions. And so one of the things I like to liken it to, and I'm not an academic, so I like to get quite pragmatic or practical when I think about governance concepts and principles, because the messaging is not just for those empowered with knowledge, it's for everyone in an organization. So I think of it as the ethical excellence within an organization is like the engine. There are many moving parts. Every part needs to play its role for the vehicle to move forward. However, the one thing that the vehicle needs and the engine needs to go anywhere is the fuel. And often, if the quality of the fuel is bad quality fuel is poured into a good quality engine, the engine is very negatively impacted. So I like to think of that leadership role is the fuel that goes into the engine. So you can have really fantastic leadership, and you pour that fuel into the engine, and the engine works perfectly, and you get to your destination, and everyone knows where we're going. But you put dirty fuel into an engine, and those of you who drive, and I'm certainly not a mechanic, but you understand the principles of an engine, it's going to have a very detrimental impact, as good as the engine might be. So I think that leadership underpinning is going to be one of the key themes that come out of today's discussion in all aspects, because we can have all the most amazing policies and procedures and mechanisms and evaluation and reporting, but if nothing comes of it, if any of the reporting or the feedback comes into the boardroom and the leaders do nothing about it, or they just talk in the boardroom and they leave and nothing happens, that's why leadership is at its core. So I do like to think of the leaders as fuel, and you can get clean fuel and you can get dirty fuel, and it all has an impact on how that ethical ecosystem works.
I love that analogy, because what it describes is how the tone of leadership can corrode the system, so creating a corrosive effect. I love that. And I think it's even true that it's probably better not to have those policies and systems, policies and procedures, if you would not follow them, than to have them. And okay, so let me come to Madam Tinu, because in your experience as sitting within a regulatory oversight position, you are observing companies responding and trying to really look good. And you look at the books and you'll see what they say or what they do, and you're like, it's not matching up. So from that perspective, tell us about when you see a company's books and you hear the leadership talk, how do you know that if you spoke to the most junior member of the company or a member of the company who's not closest to HQ, you'll find that the commitment to ethics is just as strong with that individual as it is at HQ or when they submit their reports to the regulators?
Thank you very much, and it's a real pleasure to be here. I think that creating a culture, an ethical culture in a company, I think the first thing that we have to realize is that a company is actually an artificial construct. And really, at some point, if the leadership, the fuel, as Angela so aptly put it, doesn't put everything together, it can be like the head of an elephant and the bottom of a snake, because you just have all sorts of cultures speaking, and they're speaking at different times and in different places. And so you require a multifaceted, multidimensional approach. And I think that the speakers before me have spoken about some of the things. To answer your question very directly, Lola, the point is, like as a proverb in my culture says, character is like smoke. It will always come out. And so no matter how much you cook the books and you represent yourself and you get external consultants and you get communicators, and these days you get even AI to help you to present a fantastic report, at some point, something will come out. And I think that there are certain ways to ensure that those somethings, those unethical behaviors that we need to note come out, that regulators can help with. I think some of them, to get to that shop floor guy that you're speaking about, are things like ensuring that regulators require that companies have whistleblowing channels. And so that is not something that the leadership has much of an option about. It is just something that the regulator insists that you put in the company. Another thing is to ensure that companies have policies and procedures, and that those policies and procedures are robust, and that they also have regular training, and that there is evidence of that training. So evidence of the training in terms of the reporting that you are making to regulators, not necessarily the financial reports that you put out quarterly, but that, for example, we're requiring you to give us reports on the status of your ethics. And those reports require you to tell us whether you are training your people, require you to let us know whether there have been incidents, how many incidents, what types of incidents, really a granular level of reporting that will help us to know whether what you are, that will bubble up information, the smoke from the bottom floor, that even the best reporting will make it, it's not adding up. I think also, apart from the issue of whistleblowing and also ensuring that there's reporting around various issues that the regulator mandates, I think the final thing is the regulator then itself having the ability, depending on its remit, and it's not every regulator that can go in and audit or that can go in and do an inspection. But where it's a sector regulator, often because they give a license, they will have the ability to go in and do and do an inspection, whether it's a target inspection because there's something that is of concern, or it's a normal inspection that they will just do as a condition of the license. So those kinds of things will help the regulator to bubble up something that is beyond the niceties that the entity is putting out in its own communication. Their mandate, their regulator mandated actions and communications that will bubble up. And so I'm sure as we go along, there'll be a number of other things that one can speak about. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Tinu. I took away a few things. I like the analogy of the smoke and the proverb. I want to hear it one day, but I'll summarize it this way, and I'll suggest if you're listening, make a note. As a director, this would be your responsibility. Make a note of this. I think what we're taking away from this, and I'm coming to Mr. Olusonya next, procedures, programs, compliance protocols, they are not the culture. They are not the ethical culture of your organization. That's not how you feel the pulse. You might have a 90-page code of conduct. That does not say anything about the ethical culture of an organization. And if you don't set the culture for your organization, employees will set it for you. So that brings me to Mr. Olusonya. Mr. Olusonya, from your perspective in a multinational company where you're working, or your organization's employees and stakeholders and agents are working in different contexts, cultural, social contexts, which also has an impact on the ethical perspectives. How do you build a culture where gift giving is the respectful thing to do, but it may create ethical challenges? You know, there are other examples. How do you set the culture and make sure employees understand why, what, and how they should make decisions, especially when they face ethical dilemmas?
Thanks, Mbola. I think it's very clear. From a practical example, coming from a multinational, when we started our journey in 2019 from Danone owns almost 100% shares for Pan Milk. It was a big, bulky compliance code of business conduct that came more like a Bible to all employees. And then it was like, oh, where do we start from? We did trainings, we did communication, there was emails, tone from the top, all sorts of things. There were posters all around, speak up, and all those things all over. But we noticed that people are just basically not interested because they felt, you know what, they're basically changing our culture. A typical example happened in December. We had one of our colleagues that was in charge of procurement, and then every December was bags of rice, loads of hampers on the table. And then the following year, when we started the journey, the office was empty. So we thought something was missing, and we thought, you know what was wrong? And we thought, we had a conversation to say what's basically going on. And then when we went to the shop floor, to the guys in the factory, and they said, you know what? Since they told us not to receive gifts in the office, we will be taking it to our houses. It was very shocking because what that meant to us was the policy has failed automatically. And what that meant to us was basically we are going to sack a lot of people of our employees, because what they felt was they're bringing a different culture, and it means they're going to basically, so what we had to take a step back, and then we have to basically start sensitizing them to say, you know what, we're changing the culture, but these are the principles of gifting, right? Basically in terms of transparency, in terms of record keeping, in terms of accountability. So when you get a gift from one of your suppliers, one of your agents, it means that you also have to record it. And then basically, so when nobody comes to me and tells you know what, I paid this guy 10 naira, I gave him a bag of rice. And then sometimes those gifts it must be seasonal. It's not something that I get a gift every month. And then during that journey, we noticed that some of our colleagues are basically recording some of those gifts off the cuff. Basically, one record in January, they record in March, and then they keep quiet about it. So we said to them, you know what? This is the threshold which you can basically receive your gifts. It was basically $50, which was basically the local currency. And we noticed that basically people are not so carried away with those fanciful other policies or pictures or the handouts I give them. What they want to see is basically what culture are you driving? Culture is a way of how do you live your life, right? And it meant we are going to basically do what they call basically reorientation. We are not there yet, and we're on a journey. And every time we get to talk to employees, we basically tell them, you know what, this is what we're basically doing. When we did those journeys in under 3 years, we felt that people started disclosing, people became more comfortable. Some were still not comfortable, but there will still be bad eggs within the crate, which you understand. But sometimes you also basically see how they basically see people understand that this is how you want to do business. And then working for a multinational, there's a very big perception, you're Nigerians, a lot of things are happening under the table. So how do you basically convince your investor or your parent company that what you are doing, sometimes they look at your register randomly, they do an audit and ask you, I don't believe this data you're giving me. Or are you telling me nobody got a gift in Easter or something? And then, so we need to basically see what basically need to do and say, in terms of compliance, we need a journey, right? It means you need to take all your employees along, build a sustainable way of doing business. And then I'll go another example again. When you deal with government officials, they'll tell you who are government officials, what do you give to them in Christmas, in festive period. And then you get approvals, they tell you, oh, I don't believe approvals came out without you exchanging money, right? And basically, we were also talking to guys in the government space. You know what? Oh, the guy tells you know what? I'm not sure this will work. And then so we were basically trying to see how to basically sensitize the employees well. So what we said to ourselves at the business was, we will not give what we call was going to be more branded items and then company products, which should not be things of value. So I won't give somebody a Rolex or a Cartier wristwatch or a pen, a more blank pen to say, well, because they are things of value. And then you also need to create a culture of perception, make sure the optics are very clear, and also continue on the journey that can also encourage people to join you on the journey of compliance and business.
Excellent. Okay, so we have just 15 minutes to continue the discussion, and then we'll go to question and answer. There's already an interesting question to answer for regulator, but I'll ask that. We have a different way of asking the question, as planned. So let me come back to Kemi. Thank you so much, Kunle, for that. And Kemi, I'm going to just push a little bit to talk about the personal perspective of leaders when it comes to setting this tone. You've done a lot of research. Behavioral economics plays into how leaders make ethical decisions, or how they set the tone, also demonstrating humility, but also demonstrating that they can make mistakes, acknowledging that they are infallible. How does that play in the perception of the ethical stance of an organization? What effect does it have on an organization when a leader looks weak, so to speak, but that's simply because they're human and they can make mistakes, or some leaders look weak, or the board looks weak, but that's because they've experienced an ethical dilemma and they're trying to navigate it. How does that affect the efforts to set a tone at the top of an organization, and what advice can directors take from the challenges that companies have faced in that kind of situation?
Thank you, Lola. It brings realism to the efforts. It makes people have more trust in the narrative. Why? Because they see that their leader is vulnerable. They see that their leader is like them. They see that it is possible to make a mistake and recover from it. Because really, it's not like everybody is going to become automatically perfect. I like the stories that Kunle just shared, which shows that it's a journey. And when you have a leader that can come and say, oh, we tried this, it was an error on our part, it didn't work, or I tried this, I made a mistake in taking the step, and I'm retracting it because of our core values, even though it's going to cost us this or that, it reinforces in the people's minds that this is the way we really want to go, and we're ready to acknowledge when it doesn't work. And that's that leadership humility that can endear the way that the leader is pointing out to the people who need to follow it. At the same time, it's beyond simply acknowledging mistakes and showing that, yes, even the leader is fallible, but is ready to begin again. It's actually also for the people to see that their leader is taking steps to make sure that that mistake doesn't reoccur. So it's not enough to say, oh, we can make mistakes, we did this wrongly, we're going to change it. It's to actually see the change being put in place. That's what reinforces the trust. That's what promotes that culture. It sends a message to all the other leaders down the line, so the other bosses down the line as well, that yes, we acknowledge that it's possible that you made an error, but this is what we expect if somebody makes a mistake. And therefore, it makes the effort more realistic. Obviously, it would be great if people don't make mistakes, but the reality is that sometimes people are weak. We have all taken the wrong step at one point or the other, and we need to know that it's okay to begin again. It's okay to change the plan. It's okay to do what I call striving, to keep striving, to strengthen one's ethical identity, and therefore together the corporate ethical identity. Because at the end, the ethical company is not the one in which nobody ever makes an error. It's the one in which the culture is to keep striving, to know this is where we want to be, and we're going to keep on going towards that goal steadily. And therefore, because of that, we need to acknowledge any errors and begin again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kemi. Honestly, I think you redefined that question. You just told us that weakness, making mistakes is not weakness. In fact, a sign of strength is identifying when you've made mistakes or missteps and then following through and correcting them. I think that's brilliant. So I will never define it like that anymore, that, you know, leaders make mistakes and how do they, you know, course correct. So thank you for that. Let me come to Tinu. Similar question, but from the perspective of regulators. And, you know, the question is, what are some of the most common ethical dilemmas that regulators face, and what guidance will you give them in navigating these challenges? I'm sure companies would want to know. So take it away, please.
Thank you very much, Lola. Regulators have human beings running them. And so, of course, they face the same challenges around a conflict between their personal interests and the public duty that they have to do. So, you know, is the person seeking a waiver of application of a rule my childhood friend? And can I actually extend any accommodations to that person or not on the basis of that friendship? Or do I extend the same rule that applies to everybody to that person? So that's one of them. I think another thing that regulators face is regulatory capture. And that is where there are influences within the sphere of influence of the regulator that are basically stronger than the regulator. And so what do I mean? For example, you have CEOs of very large corporates that are subject to regulation. They may be persons who bestride the national arena. They may be chief this, X that. And you know, they believe and they conduct themselves as if they have more power than the regulator, up to the point where a regulator that is not sure of him or herself and confident around his or her powers within the regulatory structure comes to believe that they have to shift in order to accommodate those types of individuals. And when they bandy together, as they can, then you get a situation where you have a capture of the regulator, and ultimately the regulator then starts feeling, before I do Y, let me check with this group of people. And this group of people complain about something that is clear. Suddenly the regulator develops cold feet and starts you know, saying something that they haven't said. Political interference, clearly, regulators, especially the sector regulators, if you look at all the laws that establish the regulatory bodies, are, you know, there are processes and there are procedures. Many of them are appointed by political office holders. Some have to be confirmed by the legislature. And so there are, you know, as the popular saying goes, he who pays the piper dictates the tune. The fact that you are a regulator does not really protect you, doesn't create a halo over you that ensure that says, well, the people that appointed you don't matter. They do. So, you know, that's another area where regulators face challenges. Now, you didn't ask me this question, but instead of just saying these are the areas, what can a regulator do? I think some of the things that a regulator can do with respect to regulatory capture is to ensure that you have regular stakeholder engagement. So you're not having secret meetings with anybody. Everybody, regularly, you're engaging with everybody. And so you're getting perspectives from everyone such that no set of people can say they are the people that have put you in a corner and you have to do what they want to do. Another thing is regular auditing and reporting. It's a former Supreme Court judge said sunlight is the best of disinfectants, Supreme Court of the US. When there's reporting, when there's transparency, when you are reporting how many approvals you gave, you're reporting how many waivers you gave, you're reporting how many exceptions you gave, not to just your board, but publicly in an annual report of that regulator, then it's very difficult for you to say one thing one year and you are the regulator and say something completely different the other year. I think also the selection process for regulators must be of people of high moral fiber and reputation, and training for those regulators, such that, because we have a situation where you cannot, as a business person, you have money, you have probably more money for training, you probably have, you get better pay. So you have regulators already starting in many instances behind in terms of remuneration, for example, in terms of regularity of training. You have to deal with, have policies to deal with those things so that somebody is not enticed by a trip to London. Another person is not enticed because I can afford a trip to London myself. I go for training at good institutions myself. So I'm not enticed by that. And I have the basic moral fiber in choosing me, that I'm also not the type of person that's easily enticed by that. So, and finally, auditing. So, regulators should also get audited, in my view, so that people know what is happening in them. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Tinu. You answered the first question in the Q&A, but we'll come to that again. In 4 minutes, and I'll crave the indulgence of the timekeepers to give us some more time, because I do want to hear Angela and Kunle's thoughts on the next question. This has been so insightful. And the next question is around technology and AI. So let me start with you, Angela. Angela, please tell us, how have you seen technology amplifying and deepening efforts to build a culture of integrity in organizations? And how do you see that will improve in the future? And of course, chime in on AI if you have time, but I'll come to Kunle to talk about AI.
So what we have seen with emerging technologies is that there are different kind of ethical challenges that are now coming into the boardroom for discussion that we perhaps haven't had in-depth conversations on before. So whilst technology can certainly help streamline processes and access to information, there is the flip side of that coin, is that some of the challenges that it brings with us. And I'm not sure that we have had sufficient time in the application and usage of many technologies that we fully appreciated what some of those down the line ethical dilemmas might be. So just off the top of my head, some of the things that we're needing to talk about and the impact of ethical decision-making, or the decision-making that is required for these challenges, is data privacy and protection. I mean, over the last couple of years, I'm certainly not a data expert, but we have seen the impact of data breaches, the impact of the misuse of data, and how that can affect the not only financial and operational elements of an organization, but the reputational elements, and how organizations can actually erode trust within their stakeholder groupings if they are not protecting data and creating security. So that's an element that we are not necessarily unpacking from an ethical decision-making. Artificial intelligence, and I have to tell you that I recently saw, and I'm happy to share the link in the chat a bit later, is an organization in Australia who have appointed an AI board member who is powered through ChatGPT. So are we discussing what AI and I'm talking through a board lens as a director, what are we considering? What biases are being brought to the table around AI? Are we considering the consumption and utilization of data and data storage when those AI channels are being utilized in a confidential board environment? That's an element that I don't know that boards are perhaps talking about. How are we impacting diversity and inclusion with the use of AI models and methodology? I mean, these are some very small elements that relates to technology, to automation, to that sort of global footprint that we now have, that we need to start looking at. And we need to ensure that the way we make decisions to promote ethical excellence, are we considering the impact of some of these technologies? In some instances, we don't yet know what that impact is going to be. So how do you take an ethical decision on the use and implementation of AI or technology if you can't really see past the next mountain or the next hurdle? So interesting space for directors to be in at this point.
Love it. Now let's clarify, because I have the same exact question that Ms. Ayabola has in the chat, which is, so this is not a chief AI officer on the board. This is an AI board member powered through
Yes.
ChatGPT.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll send I'll drop it's a YouTube link. I'll drop it on the chat as soon as I get a moment. But it is an Australian property company that have appointed a GBT powered employee to serve as a board member. Her name is Alice.
I love it, actually, and I understand. I appreciate just the unknown and uncertain universe of risks, but it's, you know, we have to take the risk to learn and be proactive about learning. It's interesting. Okay, so there you go. That's your answer, Mr. Ayabola. I'm sure other people had the same question too. So let me come to Mr. Kunle, and then we'll open up for questions. Fortunately, I have a gracious partner, colleague to moderate the questions. So, you know, I can take a break and we'll do questions and come back to you for final thoughts. But let me ask you, Mr. Olakunle, please tell us, does your company have an AI board member too? Or how do you anticipate, if you have? Actually, let me start from the first question, which is, to what extent does tech support your compliance program in building and strengthening a culture of ethics and integrity? And if you're looking into the future, gone are the days when we used to look into the future 10, 30, 40 years in advance. With technology, we have to look into the future 2 days, 3, the future is here. So if you're looking at your next strategy meeting about strengthening your compliance system, is AI in the future, or what new tech tools or systems are in the future for strengthening your compliance system?
Sorry, thanks. Technology seems to be one of the biggest things that we'll have to embrace. Nobody can ignore that fact. And I'm sure in the last couple of weeks or years, we've seen people basically type in an email or a letter through ChatGPT. However, compliance seems to be quite a very dynamic part of it, because the truth is, if you look at those good apps, Compliance AI or Dragon Fruits, you get those things basically doing. What makes a lot of difference is basically in terms of, because whatever it is, once there's a little or no human interface, basically get things right. But one of the biggest worries is basically who feeds that information into the artificial intelligence app or application that makes a difference. Maybe more practical again is basically when we're doing our compliance, and I go again to the gift register. So basically having those registers done manually, and we had timelines. So what we need to do was basically go to an application that basically have to input all your registers on or before the 31st of every quarter. What that meant to us was basically we needed to get more information, and basically how do you crunch that information, basically helping your planning. We know for sure, being a multinational company, we know AI is something that is basically here and here to stay. So what do we do differently and basically work with the employees, right? First, you get the culture right, and then basically go into technology. So what we know for sure is technology will basically change a lot of dynamics. And we've seen that already. We are basically employing, and they were not there yet because these things are being cascaded according to regions. But basically, what we know for sure is the AI will play a dynamic role in compliance journey. With all the apps coming in, with ChatGPT coming in, with compliance AI coming in, this will change a lot of dynamics. And once there's little or no human interface, it basically changes dynamics for all those things on compliance. Also, take into account that once those things are basically inputted and it gets all together, you can just with the click of a button, and globally, you can basically see what's happening in the compliance space in the country and in the market like Nigeria.
Interesting. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so enough of me only and the IOD throwing questions at you. Let's take questions from the attendees. Kemi, I think I don't see you, but would you like to moderate the questions? So
yes, I will.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so it's over to you.
Thank you very, very much, Lola, for that anchoring that session. Very, very well done. We currently have 4 questions, but one of them I believe has been answered. Femi Awoyemi asked a question about how dealing with regulators who themselves are governance challenged. I believe Ms. Tinuawe has sort of answered that question. So I'll go to the next question from Femi Ojumo, and he says, in your respective organization, what, if any, policies are utilized to motivate staff as a mechanism for enhancing ethical conduct? How does the leadership consistently and practically exemplify this? Who would like to take that question? I think I'll ask Tinu Awe, I think just because you're front and center of my screen.
Okay. All right. So I think that certainly it's not only about policies, as we've heard, but also just the general tone in the organization. So I think to really further the ethical culture, in addition to having the normal policies, conflict of interest, anti-corruption, ethics, and so on and so forth, I think having town halls where the leadership is talking about ethical issues is very, very critical. MANCOs where the leadership is talking about ethical issues, open door policies where people feel confident, as I think the prof has said, to go in and discuss ethical issues that they're facing. I think also training is very critical, training and awareness. And so what I've seen some organizations do, for example, is you can't log on to your computer in the morning without answering an ethical question. So it's reinforcing to you all the time that this is something that the organization takes seriously. You have to do the training, and if you don't do the training, you can't, even if you've passed on your substantive KPIs, and you are due for whatever performance evaluation reward, you can't get that evaluation reward until we know that you've done training. And in fact, some companies will go as to have to go ethical KPIs as well, that assess you on ethical KPIs. What I would just caution in that type of place, in that type of system, is that because ethical KPIs are more, it's kind of like you can see when something is not right, but sometimes it's not the substance that you can feel. And so perhaps you want to have a 360 degree in as far as the ethical KPIs the measuring of ethical KPIs and assessment of those KPIs, even if you don't have a 360 with your performance KPIs, which I think you should anyway. But if for some reason an organization doesn't have a 360 there, it may want to have a 360 with the ethical ones. So it's those kinds of messaging that I think will help to further the policy. I think in a culture like ours, scenarios are very, very important. So the worst thing an organization can do, in my opinion, especially in our own culture, where there are certain cultures where gift giving is okay within the context of that culture, is to leave the individuals that work with them without clarity as to what they should do in specific situations. So those constant scenarios to make the policies come alive in trainings and in communication, I think are also very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. A few of our questions seem to border on regulators and ethics. But I think I'd like to, because of time, quickly ask this question. And this question, I'm going to ask Angela Charrington to please answer this question. It's from an anonymous attendee. And the question is, what is the best way to introduce the conversation on ethical standards in a company where you are a new independent board member? I think this is a very interesting question.
Great question, because often when you are a new board member, you can use that excuse, for want of a better word, in that, forgive me if I'm asking this question and it's been dealt with. So there's a amount of time as a new board member that you can perhaps position any kind of questioning to the board, because you don't know, and maybe you're finding out. It could be interrogation in your board induction. It could even have been a conversation before your appointment as part of your due diligence. If you've done due diligence on the organization where you're appointed, and you could ask those questions, what is your what are your ethical practices? How do you see your ethical ecosystem? What policies do you have in place? How do they report to the board? And if you've haven't gone through those processes in your initial due diligence, or even in your induction, which I do hope as a new board member it has taken place, but those questions can be placed quite openly in the boardroom in terms of how are we focusing on ethics? What are our policies? What are our procedures? How are we reporting on it? And I just want to loop it back to a question that was asked in the chat, and I did type my view, but I see it was then taken off the Q&A list. But there was a question about how to deal with an ethical dilemma if it involves an influential board member. And I think the role of the chair in a situation where you have a dominant or an influential board member is really key in having the conversations around conduct, around ethical decision-making. And if the chair is the challenge, the practice of having a lead independent director who could lead those discussions is really important. So sorry, I know that's a lot of information, but just to circle back, no question is a stupid question in the board meeting. If there is something that you wish to understand, if there is something you wish to know whether the organization is doing, ask the questions. Taking a role of a directorship takes courage, and there may be some times where you need to ask direct questions. So no question should be off limits for a board member. If you are newly appointed and you want to understand what the ethical environment is, what the processes, policies, and ecosystem is, ask the question and ask it openly. You should have the courage and the ability to do so.
Thank you very much, Angela. I'm not sure we have any other time. We don't have enough time for questions, but I think this is a good time to hand over to Lola for your closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Kemi. That was excellently done. I wish we had more time for questions, but that just shows you how important this conversation is and how much the depth of the well of experience our panelists have that we can dig into. So the next time there's an invitation to an IOD webinar, you will be able to continue from where we're leaving off this conversation. To close out, let's have closing remarks from you attending the webinar yourselves, and then the panelists would respond to that. How about that? So this is a switch up of how we usually do panels. So we have a few polling questions, 2 or 3 of them. If we can put them out, so we have the remarks from yourselves, also the responses. And once we have the answers in, again, we're going with 1 minute, 20 seconds on the dot. Once we have the answers in, next time, maybe we'll try an AI tool to keep us on time with our polls. There are 3 questions. If you have 70 to 90% of responses, you can close the poll before the 1 hour, 20 minutes mark. And to the panelists, what I'd like you to do is take a look at the questions before you close the screen in front of you. And when the answers come, just pick any question to make your closing remarks about. There are many things you've said I've learned from, and many people have taken notes, I imagine. But if your closing remarks would be that thing that we should not forget if we forget everything else, tell us in about 1 minute and 30 seconds. So any of the topics here, it would be great for you to frame your closing remarks in the context of that. You can't find the poll? Okay. So I'll just quickly read the questions, Tinu. And actually, when the result is published, you'll see the poll, you'll see the questions and the responses. So I think we're just close to 1 minute mark. Can the organizers, who's behind the scenes, can you tell me, do we have 70% response or close?
36%.
36%. Okay. Okay. Is that going up?
Yes, it's gone up to 40% now.
Okay.
41. So it's increasing.
Okay. So let's close the poll in 10 seconds. Excellent. All right, let's see the answers. And so I'll start with Kunle this time. Kunle, your closing thoughts on the responses that we will see on the screen shortly, because we started with you, we came to you last when we started. So let's start with you first this time. So take a few seconds to look at the responses. I'm actually impressed to see there's a bit of, quarterly trainings happening, but more annual trainings and quite a decent number of never. Ethical violations have been reported more frequently. Fear of retaliation. All right, this is interesting. Okay, Kunle, please give us closing remarks in about 1 minute, 30 seconds. Leave the window there. Tell us what you would like us to remember. Feel free to frame it in the context of these questions.
So compliance is a journey, a way of life, right? We all know what is good and what is bad. We all have responsibility to promote a culture of ethical way of doing business, and also your action, either directly or indirectly, to your neighbor and your colleagues. So let's do the right thing and make an impact in our various society and environment.
Thank you. Call to action. Okay, so let's come to you, Angela.
So my parting remarks is understand that full picture of your ethical landscape. Don't just focus on one element to the detriment of others. Ensure that you're providing focus and attention on all of the aspects that make up your ethical landscape, and follow through. So if there is a breach, if there is a report, if there is something that has been reported through any whistleblowing channels, ensure that there is proactive investigation and follow through, because that will build trust and that will ensure that other people, that fear of retaliation may diminish, because people will see that actions are taken where there is a breach. So look at all of your landscape. It's not a one size fits all. Ensure that you've implemented policies, processes, practices that are fit for purpose, and follow through. Build trust.
I love it. Follow through, build trust. One way to also do what Angela described is the risk-based approach. Okay, let's come to Tinu and then finally to Kemi.
Thank you. I think the message that I want to send primarily is that the followers are also very important. I think we spend a lot of time talking about the leadership, but I think one of the things that I would like everyone that has attended this webinar, who is not a leader, other than, of course, our own personal self-leadership, is that you also have a role to play. You have a role to play in terms of reading the policies. So some of us don't read the policies, we don't read the handbooks, we don't go for training, and we just have a general negative, nothing will change approach. There is change in the world now, and there is no company that wants to participate in this global world that can ignore ethics. And you as a follower have a role to play as well. And it's important that you play that role, whether you're whistleblowing, whether you're advising colleagues to go forward when they come to you, whether you're putting the head of the feet of your supervisor to the fire because they're not doing something, and so on and so forth. It's very important that the followers too do something. And the corollary of that is obviously that it's important that leaders create a culture where people feel comfortable to be effective followers, effective followership. You need to create a culture of effective followership. Very critical. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tinu. That was brilliant. Leading Without Title is the name of one of my favorite books for the last few years. So I highly recommend that. And also the vibe in the middle is also quite as important as the tone at the top. Love it. Excellent. And finally, but not least, Kemi.
Thank you. I would like us to keep in mind the importance of always going with more than a single approach when we want to enshrine ethical culture. I wanted to particularly point out that when we look at the organization, we should never remember, that was funny, we should never forget that we need to look at the company as a whole, and we need to look at the individuals. When we're looking at the company as a whole, we sometimes go heavy on compliance, and that's important. And that's what will mitigate many of these issues here when it comes to people being afraid of speaking up within the organization. You know, we need clear policies, we need clear procedures, we need clear sanctions when things go wrong. We need to remove the fear of retaliation by having a whistleblowing process that protects whoever needs to speak up. But at the same time, we can't go overboard on compliance to the extent that we forget to push for the integrity of the people, which speaks to the importance of training, the importance of open door policies, the importance of communication, importance of the followers being responsible also for the ethical growth of the organization. And in that regard, even when we look at only the followers, I think we should also keep on looking from more than a single dimension. Sometimes when we do trainings, we focus only on the technical issues. I think we also have to focus on developing moral competence, so that we need to include virtues in our training programs. Sometimes we also need to deal with the emotional issues that people may have when they're faced with dilemmas. So we need to bring more and more of that component that makes the people stronger in our trainings, not only trying to tell them this is what you do in this case, you know, not only the technical answers, but to build their capacity as humans to have the courage to speak out, or to have the courage to do the right thing, or to simply even have the goal to be an ethical person.
Thank you so much, Tinu, for that. There's a Martin Luther King quote you might all know, but I'll misquote it now. I was just typing moral competence, training on compliance and moral competence. People are not machines. You know, the technical training is good, but it's important to develop the moral competence as well. And there's a Martin Luther King quote about law, that laws may not change somebody's heart or how they feel towards me, a discriminatory person, for example, but it will prevent them from killing me. You know, and as a compliance or ethics officer, you actually do want to change hearts. You know, you want to go beyond just making rules that would encourage people to act ethically, but also make sure those rules comes with incentives and you know, punishment that over time changes people's behavioral patterns also, because that's when an ethical culture becomes sustainable. So thank you so much. And again, many appreciations to the IOD, to the Ethics Committee for a brilliant job of selecting such wonderful panelists. I had tons of fun just having this conversation, as we've done with the rest of the IOD folks. So I'm very pleased to pass it back to you. I think we've been very good on time, only 4 minutes over time. So I am grateful that we were able to stay on time and still cover a lot. Thank you so much for being awesome panelists, every single one of you. And to everybody behind the scenes, Kene, Ononuju, everybody who's made this happen. Thank you all to you for your hard work. And I'll turn it back over to you, Kemi.
Thank you very, very much, Lola, for excellent moderating. Thank you very much. Panelists, Professor Kemi Ogunyemi, Ms. Tinu Awe, Mr. Olakunle Olusonya, and Angela Cherrington. Thank you very, very, very much. I've taken a few things away from this webinar as well. And basically understanding that navigating the ethical horizon is a journey. And I hope that this webinar has given our participants, some more tools to check their ethical climate in their various organizations. Thank you very, very much. On behalf of our president, the Governing Council, the Ethics Committee, I thank all the participants for attending, for taking time to attend. And the Chair of the Ethics Committee, Mrs. Amina Oyabola, do you have some final words for us?
Not really, except to lend my voice to the gratitude and the appreciation that you have already espoused. It's been a wonderful session, and I also have been enhanced and enriched, from all the contributions of our distinguished panelists. Thank you all so much for being here and for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much as we embark on our ethical journey, which we understand is an aspirational one. So we must keep striving for ethical excellence. Thank you very, very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you for the excellent moderation by everyone. Thank you. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much. Kenneth, anything more before?
Madam Chair, thank you very much. You did a great job, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Is that my doctor? Is that our vice chair? Dr. Nosike, do you want to say anything? Please contribute. I didn't realize you were there.
All right.
Dr. Gokai.
Can you hear me? Just give thanks to the President and Council, and to also thank you, Madam Chair. Your opening remarks, your speech was remarkable. Your speech, a friend of mine said to his students some time ago, read your paper again, and you will feel very good about yourself. I'd like you to read it again. You did an excellent job, and it was great. Thank you so much. Lola, thank you. Kemi, Kunle, Tino, and Angela, thank you so much. But I would like to also thank the DG and Kene, and those who haven't been visible. A lot went into this, and it's been a huge success. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gokai. And yes, indeed, our secretariat has been brilliant. I really can't take the full credit for my speech. It was I was enabled by the secretariat, by Kene and team. But thank you all very much for all your inputs. I think that this has been very, very fruitful. And I hope we have all enjoyed it as well, and we've all benefited as well. Have a great rest of the day and rest of the week. And I hope you will tune in, everyone, to the next CIOD webinar. I don't know if our DG would like to say something. Mr. Alimi, I can see you there. DG?
Good afternoon, Madam Second Vice President. I think all that should be said has been said. I want to also join Mrs. Adewale to say thank you for everyone that has made this happen. Thank you very much. It's been wonderful listening to our wonderful list of panelists. They've been wonderful, and it's quite enlightening. I think we've learned so much. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Angela. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye. Keep well.